Okay, is everybody okay?
Yep.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. There it is, eh?
Good job. Good job.
Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests?
No.
There being none? Oh, there's no opposed. So, before we move on to the next rest of the agenda, I understand Mayor Collier would like to introduce a motion to suspend the rules of procedure to add an item to the end of the agenda. You wish to speak to the motion, Mayor?
I would like to move that we suspend the rules to add an item to the agenda, please, Chair.
I'll second it. You need to second it?
No,
No,
not at
okay.
Okay,
Never mind.
so all in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Okay, the motion carries. Okay, and then I guess we'll address that after presentations. And now moving on to adoptions of the minutes. We have the minutes of the regular meeting of the General Government Committee on September 10th, 2018. Are there any questions on the minutes? There being none, can I get a mover to approve the minutes?
Move to approve minutes.
Regional councilors, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion carries. So, moving on to the consent agenda, the following items have been pulled for discussion: 4.1 by Regional Councilor Crawford and 4.8 by Regional Councilors Lee and Crawford. Can I get a motion to approve the balance of the consent
I
agenda?
also have 4.4,
I'll move it.
please.
So we're gonna have 4.4 and Regional Councilor Dyes has moved. All those in favor? The motion carries. So we've added 4.2? 4.4. Okay, so we're now moving on to item 4.1. Regional Councilor Crawford pulled this item.
Yeah, my question was around recreation revenue. The revenue streams from the fitness gym are well under budgets, revenue stream. We're not concerned about that because we're servicing the needs of our community, right? So it's just a statement of fact, it's not a statement of concern, right? So the other one would be the low participant registration experienced by the user groups for the ice and floor rentals, especially in the village arena. Through you, Mr. Chair, could I have Sheila? Do I just bounce to Sheila to Tracy?
Whoever wants.
So through the chair, so first speaking to fitness revenue, so we are still making money in the fitness area. It's not that we're not making money. Our revenues, they tend to go up and down between group fit and registered fitness. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but to your point and to the report we put to council, we really are looking at that sort of entry-level basic fitness for our community. In terms of ice, there's an interesting story happening in ice and floors, so what you're seeing is both. OMHA this year put forward regulations to hockey, basically around the size of the rink and the field of play for younger players. So they had to basically split the ice, put in bumper infrastructure during those games, which then basically doubled up the amount of teams they could get on the ice. So we did see a fair amount of turn back from AMHA because now rather than having one team or two teams on the ice, they could have four. So obviously they didn't need as much ice, they needed a lot less ice. So we did have a significant turn back from AMHA, which AMHA didn't expect, we didn't expect, but it's the nature of sort of the direction you will get from presiding bodies like OMHA. We did see a small dip as well in floors around our lacrosse and our roller derby. So that was something that we also saw which contributed, that was much more, that was a minor contributing factor. One of the things I will say about ice is, as we know overall, ice sports are declining sort of across the board. We've been really fortunate in Ajax that we've really maintained our ice utilization at fairly healthy levels. We will continue to sort of monitor and look at that. Obviously, with Rec and Culture Master Plan, we're watching to see, you know, how many services do we need in Ajax? What's our tipping point? We work with our clubs as well to help them with things like registration, free trial activities. We have a skate loan program that we're starting with CDCD to really try to build the interest and access to ice sports, because ice sports are expensive. So trying to get people into ice sports and removing some of those barriers. So there's a number of proactive strategies we're employing, but yes, There was a dip, and that's the reason why.
So we did an audit a few years ago, I think, on the ice usage. Will that all come out through the master plan, the rec master plan?
So every couple of years, we do a review for ice allocation policy. So it looks at what are our utilization rates, what's prime versus non-prime right now, what are some of the trends in ice utilization. So we will be looking at that again in advance of the rec and culture master plan. So at that time, we were holding at about a 96% ice utilization, which is really high, sort of in this age. I would suspect it's gone down a little with these changes through OMHA, but we can definitely share that information with council.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Regional Councillor Lee.
Through the chair, in terms of our marketing strategy, like, so we see that sales Q1, Q2 our profits are not hitting benchmarks. Do we increase our marketing budget? Do we increase, do we try, is it kind of like, do we hit quotas kind of thing? Do we approach it from that kind of point of view?
So through the chair, so this ice utilization is through the clubs. So it's AMHA, it's Durham West, it's the clubs that are actually turning back their ice time, so it's not town time. What we do when we get that ice turned back is we do often have the opportunity to sell that ice. But it's in the beginning, it's actually already spoken for by the club. So we
Right.
have an ice utilization or ice meeting, a user group meeting in the prior to the season, where they basically plan out what they think their season's going to look like. They commit to that ice, but things happen, like this OMHA thing, where they will turn ice back mid-season.
But even from a fitness point of view,
Yes.
with our gyms, if we find
Yes.
we have low membership,
Mhm.
we'll think of some sort of marketing campaign to drive that.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. I had asked this question of the director already, but I'm planning to ask again. So for the revenue from parking funds, it's 67,000 surplus. So I'm just wondering if the new on-street parking permit system will have an impact on that for going forward.
Sheila.
Through the chair.
Sorry, Director. Yeah, straight.
Through the chair, you're absolutely right. So in this case, we have been experiencing excess revenue to budget for parking revenues. However, with the implementation of the on-street parking permits, we expect that we will have a fall. We just won't know how much that decreases. So we're going to leave the budget alone for 2019. And with that implementation, then we'll have a good idea for 2020 on what our budget number should be.
Madam Clerk.
That's fine. I would just add that the on-street parking permit program was characterized as a one-year pilot, and part of the reason is that at the end of that year, we'll do a full assessment of the revenue impact and all the other impacts. So, and then that will inform, of course, the next year's budget.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have amendment to move by regional, not quite? Okay, so we need a mover for the motion.
I'll move.
Okay, Mayor Collier, all in favor? Okay, the motion passes. And now we're on to 4.4. Is that right? Mayor Collier? Was that you?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to, hold on. This is to do with the tree pruning. This would be Catherine? Just seems like a lot. I worked at, it's almost $4,000 a tree.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, this project we've actually put out twice, understanding that we have over the last number of years stuck to a 5-year pruning cycle, but understanding that the costs associated with it have increased significantly. We changed our unit rate, or we changed the number of units that we were providing that service to, and this is for climbing and non-climbing. And so we reduced the level of service to align more with what we have in the operating budget to manage this going forward. But for a number of years, the town has received very favorable pricing on our block pruning contracts. We've put this out twice, and this is the number.
Okay, fair enough. However,
Yeah.
would it make sense for us to take this in-house and do this ourselves? hire the appropriate people, get the appropriate equipment, and do it ourselves. If this is gonna be the case, if we're going to be, if the price is the price, and the people know the price is the price, they can pretty much charge what they want, would it make sense to go in-house?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we investigated a lot of options during this process, and it's actually $40 a tree, not $4,000 a tree, based on the number of units that.
You're usually pretty good at math, I'll have to check this again.
Well, my colleague, Director of Finance, quantified that for me, but I don't have the number of units, but it is broken out between the climbing and non-climbing. I think, off the top of my head, I think it's 3,500 climbing versus the non-climbing. And we did investigate a number of options. Bringing this level of service in-house was one of them. We reviewed it with, of course, the manager of environmental services, Tim Field. We looked at the options, which would include the purchase of a new bucket truck, which would include new staff, which would include a significant amount of training, and the numbers did not support bringing it in-house.
Okay. Is this a year-round operation?
We actually, we award this now because we have to meet the bird nesting. So we do a lot of the pruning in the winter months. So we have to be completed this by June 30th. July 1st is the bird nesting, so we can't do any work in that time frame.
Okay. And I stand corrected, thank you, Sheila, it is $40 a tree. My math is way off on that one, thank you.
Just the decimal point.
Just missed a couple of decimals.
Through the chair, Mayor Collier, we have put this out twice.
Yeah.
We have investigated all options, and this is the number. We've been significantly, I think, fortunate over a number of years to receive favorable pricing, but that has changed.
Okay, thank you.
Regional Councilor Sterling.
Just a quick question to, through the chair. The map that was provided, that's the area that we're pruning. Are these the only areas that we have trees in? Or like, for example, it just seems odd that we have like certain crescents that, you know, have this pruning option, but other crescents that don't. So like, how was the choice made of where we prune, where we don't prune? Or like, my first question, is this the only areas that have trees?
Through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee, this isn't the only area. We have trees throughout town. However, this is done in a cycle. So this area of town is the location that's identified for this section of trees to be pruned.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? So now I make a motion, or ask for a motion.
I'll move it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, moving on to 4.8, Regional Councilor Lee and Crawford, I think both those.
So ultimately, I just wanted to pass a motion amending the, by adding the following clause into the language there, saying that, and the staff be directed to advance the planned review of the election sign bylaw to be completed prior to the 2019 summer recess, and that such review include an examination of measures to reduce the volume of election signs permitted in the town of Ajax during municipal, provincial, and federal elections, including but not limited to measures such as increasing the distance separation requirements between election signs and prohibiting election signs on local roads. So I can speak on that now. It was just, this past election was really an eye-opener. And so I've now been actively part of 3 elections, and signs have become a major issue, both in terms of our environmental impact, in that we can't really recycle these signs. Ideally, they're reused again, but there's no guarantee. And then just the danger that these signs cause in terms of sight lines. But most importantly, it looks awful. I can't speak for the South Ajax, but I know between wards 1 and 2, Rosslyn Road became just the most disgusting piece of road that we had. And it's because signs become this huge arms race between candidates. Oh, someone knocked over your sign, you gotta, you know, and I just would rather candidates in all elections, in this coming federal one, most importantly, focus more on knocking on doors and reaching constituents rather than just trying to get their name out because they feel they have to. So that's ultimately why I'm putting this motion in place. I think it'll just instruct staff to find other alternatives. Rather than waiting to 2022, let's address it right away, because I think for the most part, a lot of people acknowledge the waste involved with these signs.
Regional Councilor Crawford.
Could I make a, I don't know, I've never done a friendly amendment. I don't know if that's because I'm not friendly, but yeah, I'd like to actually have the sign period time reduced to like 3 weeks. I'm not sure what the city of Pickering does. They're
It's a
4
month,
weeks?
yeah.
Okay, so I'd like us to mirror what Pickering does and take it down from 6 weeks to 4 weeks for exactly the same reason that Regional Councillor Lee has said. Because that's what I was gonna talk about, part of it in my pulling this, but I don't know, can we add that?
So,
I don't know if that's a friendly amendment. or
I'm
completely
happy to
different.
add the last element of just the time of which signs are displayed within the election period.
So 30 days?
I think right now, we're just asking for town recommendations, if I'm not mistaken, that's what
Reduce
the
the amount.
amendment's going right now. So we'll let the town bring forth or the staff bring forth the recommendation. But mine is specifically, I'd like this before the 2019 federal election in October, so before summer recess.
Okay, Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was part of the recommendations for the strategic plan as well, some of the things we want to look at. And I did speak with the clerk last week about this as well, and about this, the timing wise, and absolutely agree with this. This is something we have to look at. It's just, not just election signs, all signs. Also we talked about the, you know, on the weekends, the regional bylaw, and I guess our bylaw also allows the real estate signs. But these are for real estate developments that are in Bowmanville and Coburg and Peterborough. They're not even local, but they're cluttering up our streets. So I think we need to look at the sign bylaw as a whole. Just to the clerk, timing, is that achievable before summer break, that manager bylaw would have a chance to review the sign bylaw and get back to us?
So, through the chair, as you'll recall, last year we separated out the election sign bylaw from the temporary sign bylaw, so they're two distinct bylaws now. The election sign bylaw, we're very much agreeable to what's being proposed here. The timing works within our work plan and our resources, so we can certainly get that done before the summer recess to make sure that we catch the federal election. At this moment, I can't commit to a complete review and implementation of the temporary sign bylaw before summer recess, but I can assure you it's on our work plan this year. We've identified the concerns that you just raised, which we're quite agreeable that those are concerns as well, so that will be reviewed this year. But it requires a bit of a more comprehensive review. The election sign provisions were reviewed in full last year, and the provisions that are being proposed today we think we can deal with quite quickly. So this one certainly we can do within the time frame that Councillor Lee's proposing.
Okay, and this would just be for local roads for the region. We're gonna have to pass a similar motion at the region.
Yes, if you'd like to see similar restrictions on regional roads,
Okay,
yes.
so even if we pass as an Ajax council, that wouldn't affect regional roads. Regional roads, they could still do whatever the regional plan says.
That's correct, and I understand that last term of council, the city of Pickering tried to pursue an all-out ban on regional roads and weren't successful. So it really, our sphere of governance is as far as what we allow on local roads.
And as far as the Elections Act, are we trumped by that federally and provincially, or do federal and provincial still have to follow the local bylaws as town municipal candidates?
Yes, those election acts require candidates in those elections to comply with local sign bylaws.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Dice?
Thank you. So when we do this review, I guess that the only thing I would like to add to that is that we also look at the advantages of the signs, and I understand all the issues that you've raised, and I know people don't particularly like the number of signs, but it was very different this election. There was a lot of candidates running. The other issue is that we always have a provincial campaign in June, just prior to our campaign, so that it's like continuous, seems contiguous, so people don't like that either. But I have to say, I've used the same signs for 15 years, and I put a sticky on them, and I do this, so you know, they've really served me very well, and at the end of the day, this time I couldn't do that, correct, but none of them are recyclable, and I don't know why that is, because whether it's the ones that fit on the frames, or whether it's plasticor, for some reason, there's no market for recycling them. So that is an issue, but the flip side of that is, as a candidate, it's my responsibility to ensure that the electorate knows that I'm running. And I think we're in flux here now, because we need, the voting list doesn't work for us anymore. We need to look at ways of getting more information electronically, which means you're gonna have to pay for a system next time around. So it's really tough to get your name out there. If you do print material, a lot of it goes in the bin anyway, and that's not, that's not recyclable anymore either. So there's a lot of challenges, but I've always felt, and I could tell you because my different name, that people, they always told me at the door, they saw the sign. So it does work. So it does let people know who's running. They're in traffic or whatever, and they're driving, and they may go home and Google that. So you know.
Regional
So
Council.
I'd like to look at that too, look at the advantages and disadvantages.
Thank you. Regional Council Crawford.
Are we able to, if we were to reduce the time frame to 4 weeks like Pickering, is it different on regional? Does that have to come to regional too? Or can we just pass a bylaw that in Ajax, regardless of the street, you can't put a sign up before 4 weeks before?
Through the chair, so the regional roads would still be governed by the region's bylaw, and this was a problem in other municipalities as well, where the start date for the local municipality did not align with the start date for the regional municipality, and so candidates had to remember, okay, I can start putting up signs along these roads on this date, and then along local roads on this date. So we are working with the region all the time to try and harmonize these provisions, harmonize the dimension provisions, all these types of things, but it's a struggle with 8 lower tiers and 1 upper tier, and who maybe have different views on how these things should be. But at the end of the day, it really goes back to the earlier point that we can only govern the rules around signs on local roads.
I know in Scarborough, they were like 3 weeks before the election.
Yeah.
They're very, very short, which is actually really good. I do agree that signs are a way of promoting yourself. Like you absolutely, as much as I would love to get rid of them completely, you need it for promotion, but yeah, I think that the time of 6 weeks is way too long. And you spend way too much time chasing after signs and not enough time on the doors, for my opinion.
Regional Councilor Lee.
I think the methodology behind my amendment ultimately is, I don't discourage the fact that signs are good name recognition, but I also think that if you have enough lawn signs, if you knocked on enough doors and really got someone's buy-in to put a sign on their lawn, then that's tantamount to getting advertisement, endorsed advertisement from that constituent. But on local roads where it's the Wild West, literally, I just find that it's a substitution for knocking on doors, which I think is the more important aspect of any kind of democratic election.
I have a question. So I understand it's more procedural. So what Regional Councilor Lee is, in his amendment, staff will look at that, consider it, and then would you report back then? How does that work? Do you report back to us saying, to council saying, this is what we think, we're going to, mirror the regional roads, or we're going to absolutely cut out on local roads all the ulterior signs. So is that the procedure that happens now?
That's right. So we'll go away and we'll start working on this, and we'll look at bringing recommendations. We will bring recommendations back to GGC before summer recess,
Right.
Which examine the things on the list here. So distance separation requirements, prohibiting election signs on local roads, and I suggest we add a bullet that says reducing the time period in which signs are permitted.
Right. That was my next question. How
Yeah,
can we
and-
insert that as well?
Yeah, so that's the wording I would propose, and then we'll look at options, we'll do some benchmarking, and to some of the other points that have been raised, we'll also look at all those other components, so the fairness component of, are we doing something that might significantly advantage incumbents over new candidates? Are we advantaging a certain ward that happens to have more regional roads running through it than the other wards? So we can examine all of those things. But I'm looking at this, I'm confident we can kind of strike a balance between reducing the clutter while still maintaining an election sign regime that's fair to both incumbents and newcomers.
Right. Okay, and to Mayor Collier's point of, so this is signs, not just election signs.
Just election signs.
Oh, so we're just speaking about just election signs at this time. Okay. Councillor Ashmead Khan.
Since we're going in that direction, should we not also consider the amount, the quantity of signs on the regional roads as well? I think the lawn signs, I think you should be able to do how many you need. because you get to direct, as Councilor Lee has said, you go face to face with the constituents, and you win that over and you get that sign with the big signs. That's where the clutter really is. So maybe the quantity of the big signs.
So
Maybe
just
we-
regionally, we have to convince regional council.
Right.
That's, yeah.
On that, yeah. So I'm just considering, as a consideration on the quantity of the regional, of the big signs, the arterial signs. But I think the smaller signs should, whatever you want, because that's your action, that's your work with your constituents.
Are there any other questions on the amendment? So I should,
Read it again? Reading it again?
I guess there's more to it, or did you just
I
kind of?
believe it's just a friendly amendment, so you wouldn't need to vote on it, but it's just adding a bullet to the items that staff are directed to examine, and it's reducing the time period in which signs are permitted, election signs.
So I can read it? So that the motion be amended by adding the following clause, and that staff be directed to advance a planned review of the election sign bylaw to be completed prior to 2019 summer recess, and that such review include an examination of measures to reduce the volume of election signs permitted in the town of Ajax during municipal, provincial, and federal elections, including but not limited to measures such as increasing distance separation requirements between election signs, prohibiting election signs on local roads, and you're adding,
Reducing the time at which signs are allowed to be displayed.
okay? So we should do that, and then we're not gonna have a motion.
So that motion's on the floor.
Okay, so now we're gonna have a vote on the amendments. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. And then now I have to ask,
On the motion as amended.
right, the motion carries the amendment. All right,
I have a
On
question
main
on the
motion as
original.
amended.
on the motion as amended.
What happened?
And then Marilyn Crawford has a question. Sorry, Councilor Crawford.
Can I just ask a question?
Mhm.
Okay. So I was just reading through the report. I love the fact that 87.4% of the people that voted love the online. That's great, that's huge. What I love most is that we captured like 17.2 people who said that if it hadn't been online, they wouldn't have voted. I think that's amazing. So good job on that. Good job on picking Smart Vote. Was it Smart Vote? What was the name of the company?
Simply Voting.
Simply voting.
Because everybody else went down and we didn't. Good
Well
job.
done.
Well done.
Sorry. Pick
Well
right.
done, yeah. And the other thing, of course, that came up was the incorrect information on the voters list. Totally understand that is not, that is a common thing that happens. It just seemed to be ridiculously highlighted at the one debate that I was at. When you said that in this report it says that when people came to you with the errors, you addressed it right away. So I'm assuming that corrected everything, but what happens now next year when MPAC list comes out again? Did MPAC correct it on their end? Sorry, did MPAC correct it on their end? Or do we just get the whole mess again in 4 years?
So through you, Mr. Chair, presumably we shouldn't get the whole mess again. What happens after the election is a month after Election Day, we're required to send the voters list data as it's corrected back to MPAC. So all the information that we collect, all the corrections that we get over the course of the election, that gets sent back to MPAC electronically, and they supposedly update their records using that information. So if somebody came to us and said, this person no longer lives here, or you have my date of birth wrong, or whatever the issue may be, that information is back in MPAC's hands now, and they should be using that to update their database.
And I guess we don't actually compare apples to apple or apples to oranges in the next election. So you don't actually go through our list and their list to see if that actually happened?
We can do certain checks just to see if corrections happened. However, just based on what you see in the report and over the course of the election, we are talking about quite a large
Yeah,
volume
I
of corrections. We
realize that.
can't manually check every one.
Yeah.
We import the data from MPAC at the beginning of every election, so it's like we start off with a fresh list. And that also makes sure that it reflects all the changes in MPAC system over the 4 years between the elections. Because as you can imagine, there's quite a few individuals coming and going who become residents, who leave Ajax. And we need to make sure we have as much up-to-date information as we can going into an election.
It seems to me that MPEC doesn't seem to place as much importance on this as we do. And there's no accountability, which really irritates me because they being in existence at times. I just want to make sure I covered all my questions, talked about some voting. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you,
Councillor-
thank you very much.
Councillor Barrow?
Thank you. I think this, just my comment, I think the online voting system was brilliant. It was so easy to use, so thank you to all those decision makers. But I did hear at the door several times, I'm remembering now, from seniors who don't have computers, don't trust computers, don't trust phoning, want to go to a place and vote by paper ballot. So I know that's maybe going backwards, but is there any kind of way to accommodate that, like that? So maybe they take their voter letter, bring it into a center and trade it for a ballot? Or something, I have no idea. I remember now to mention that at this time.
Well, I can certainly offer a couple comments to that effect. There are municipalities in Ontario that offer kind of blended systems where they use multiple types of technology. Our experience with that generally is that you wind up with the costs of both systems, but often the benefits of neither, because usually there are certain inherent benefits to just using an electronic system or just using a paper ballot system. But when you bring them together, say the time advantages you might get with an electronic ballot, you lose because you're now taking paper ballots that you've offered through another stream, having to count those separately, add them back into the results. So there's consequences to building a system like that. We do conduct a review before every election of the voting methods that will be on offer, and it is something that we can explore at that time. That usually happens a little bit closer to the election, usually in the year before. We did have a lot of success with the telephone voting system as well. We had a lot of residents who had that lack of comfort with an online platform, and they found the telephone voting system to be very effective as well. And we encouraged a lot of residents who shared that concern with us to try the telephone, and were pretty satisfied with it. So it's certainly something we can look at. There are just consequences to introducing more technologies and more means of voting.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments on 4.8? Are we all done with that? So now,
Motion to move.
Yeah.
With amendments, or as amended?
yeah, yes, sorry. So I can get a mover, please? Okay, and all in favor? Thank you. Green. So next, are we moving on to presentations?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for bringing it. So first up, 6.1, modernizing the Ajax's approach to community consultation advisory committees. We have Cole Cooper.
Sorry, miles away.
Yeah. Coming on. Harder than thought. Good job.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So you know me, I'm Nicole, and I'm joined by Sarah Moore, our Committee and Accessibility Coordinator, and Rachel Ray, Acting Manager of Public Affairs and
Public and Strategic Affairs.
Thank you. So the subject of the presentation today is a new approach that we would like to propose as it relates to public consultation. And as you know, Ajax is seen as a real leader within the region and the GTA in a lot of the areas related to communications and outreach and social media. But one of the goals of Rachel and Christy and their team this year is to really become a leader in the community engagement and public consultation space. So that's kind of what this presentation is about today. The forthcoming launch of the town's public engagement platform really provides a jumping off point for that. But there's really a bigger piece to this conversation, which involves sort of a menu of consultation tactics that we'd like to pursue, and which I'll outline in just a little bit. And as we start to think about how we can be on the cutting edge of community engagement, an obvious place to look at is our advisory committee model. And so we know that the advisory committees are really well supported by excellent staff, Sarah and all the liaisons from the different departments that support committees, by council members themselves, and by lots of engaged volunteers. But the model itself has become extremely dated, and committees of this style are really like a relic of the Municipal Act circa 1990. It's a very dated model. And it's frankly one that municipalities our size and bigger are starting to sort of shift away from. So as far as where we want to go with public engagement, the bureaucracy that's associated with advisory committees is really going to start to get in our way as we try to move to a more modern approach. So my report's in the agenda. It was written by all of us together, and I know that everybody has read it, so I will try not to get too into the weeds, but this is a pretty significant change to be proposed, so there's a few things that I'd just like to highlight and flesh out a little bit. So just by way of background, for the last decade or so, the town has had 6 advisory committees and 3 quasi-judicial boards. And the names and mandates of those committees have kind of been tinkered with over the years, but generally that's the model that we've sort of had in place for probably a couple decades, would you say?
Yes.
So these are all committees of council, and that is to say that they are established by council, their mandates are set by council, and the members of them are appointed by council. And so they're considered to be local boards under the Municipal Act, which has a number of really important implications, and I'll discuss that in a moment on the next slide. So you'll see some of these have little stars beside them. The Accessibility Advisory Committee, the Heritage Advisory Committee, and the 3 quasi-judicial boards all have duties that are prescribed by provincial legislation. So these are committees that the town must have and must operate in accordance with the applicable piece of legislation or several pieces. The other committees all exist at the town's discretion. So generally, our advisory committees are made up of about 10 community members and 1 to 2 council members, and each committee is assigned 1 to 2 staff liaisons from the applicable department. They meet on a monthly basis, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, and they're comprised of a very impressive group of local experts and really engaged volunteers, and they provide a tremendous value to staff in terms of their advice and their thoughts on the different projects and initiatives that we have underway. Okay, so where do the problems come in? So as I mentioned, boards and committees of council are subject to an array of procedural and administrative requirements under the Municipal Act. And many of them you'd be familiar with because they're similar to those that are required of council. So we're talking about agendas, public notice requirements, open meeting requirements, quorum, minutes, all of these types of things. And these are cumbersome administrative requirements as it is, but here's the kicker. There's more red tape coming. So there's new changes coming to the Municipal Act that come into effect on March 1st that will bring all of these committees into the realm of codes of conduct, integrity commissioners, investigations, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and some new requirements under that. We'll have to have a registry for all of our advisory committees where we list and publish all of their conflicts. So the details of that are outlined in the report, but suffice to say, the new regime really kind of introduces a new bureaucratic overlay onto our advisory committees. And the question is really, do these sort of bureaucratic requirements add value in the context of advisory committees? So, I mean, I'm a clerk, right? So nobody loves agendas, minutes, public notice. These are really important governance components. For council and its standing committees, you're governing a huge corporation, making important budgetary decisions and so on. But do these things add value when our purpose is really engaging people and trying to catch the pulse of the community and engage people in more kind of creative and fun ways? Or are they just sort of stifling that effort? So it's really about asking, is that sort of inflexible monthly chug of meetings still the right approach to obtaining the type of feedback that we're after? There's a number of other issues with the advisory committee. So many of you would be familiar with this. There's a bit of an unclear reporting relationship. Again, this is detailed in the report, but it really refers to the fact that committees in practice are providing advice to staff, and so that is considered by staff and it's reflected in our recommendations to council. But in a technical sense, these are committees of council reporting to council. So it's a bit of an awkward trifecta. What exactly is that relationship between the committees and council? And it's been the source of frustration for a lot of people involved in administering the advisory committees and participating in them. Scope and mandate present some issues as well. So all of the advisory committees at some point have struggled with this question of is our role really strictly advisory, or can we be sort of more of an action-oriented committee? And you can imagine the people that sit on these committees are very energetic, engaged, and they want to be involved in community events and sort of more on-the-street stuff. Which is great, but as these ideas arise, it can be hard sometimes on the staff side, because we don't have them funded within the budget, we don't have the staff capacity to deliver them. Are there liability or insurance issues with volunteers out acting in the community without staff present and these types of things? So it's really finding that balance between the advisory role and the action-oriented role, and then supporting it properly. Content, so the content coming to committees, there's a number of issues here. It's very often the case, and Sarah can speak to this a little bit more, but that there simply isn't enough content coming to committees to make every monthly meeting worthwhile for the people that are attending. So it's often sort of at the 11th hour, have we got anything for this month? Should we cancel the meeting? And then on occasion, it's the case that there's far too much content coming all at once. The agenda's too big to squeeze into a one meeting for 2 hours once a month. There's also some timing issues. So sometimes there's items that staff really ought to be going to the committees for consultation purposes, but it's just not aligning with our internal deadlines. Perhaps it's a planning matter that has statutory timeframes associated with it, and you just can't make it to the committee that month. And then this timing piece also comes into play because there's a lot of situations where the committees don't feel that they've been consulted at the proper stage in the process. So maybe it's too early and there's not enough flesh on the bones yet to really provide wholesome feedback, or maybe it's too late in the process and the project is already sort of a foregone conclusion and is this kind of just a superficial consultation. So this monthly schedule is just so inflexible. It doesn't always line up with the work, basically, the work product that's happening at the town. Attendance. So poor attendance is an ongoing problem. There's not an obvious solution to it. Certainly, there's been a lot of adjustments made over the years to better support members' ability to attend, changing the attendance management policies, changing the meeting start times, changing the dates. Pretty much to no avail. These committees have perpetual quorum issues. Some of them go 4 or 5 meetings without ever approving their minutes because they can't ever achieve quorum. Again, that also results in Sarah spending a lot of time managing attendance, tracking attendance, and it really comes back to this theme of is that really adding value? Is that a good use of our time overseeing all these sort of little administrative components? Limited reach. So there's definitely benefits to having the same 10 people around the table all the time. They know our business well, they know our issues well, very experienced people with a unique expertise. But it's still the same 10 people every month for 4 years. And there's people that apply to the committees that get turned away because there's not enough spots. So is there a model that can allow us to kind of cast a wider net? And there is. So we envision a different approach that's free from all of those issues, where we can do more consultation with the same amount of resources that we're currently investing into that advisory model. So we want to strip out the red tape and basically substitute like a fresher, funner, more flexible range of tactics to engage the community. And one that will allow us to reach more people. So we think we can offer more opportunities, engage more people in a meaningful, in-depth consultation on topics and projects of interest to them without necessarily requiring them to sign on for 4 years of monthly meetings. Those meetings also, I think a lot of people bring a lot of energy to the table, but they're still, once a month, sort of pseudo-formal meetings, same format every time, same people every time. We need to freshen things up a little bit for the benefit of our volunteers and also for the benefit of the town in terms of the quality of feedback that we're receiving. So what could that look like? It could look like a couple things or a range of things. So the first one is our public engagement platform. which launches later this month, and is going to offer it's a real robust consultation engagement tool, so it will offer things like polls, surveys, discussion boards, Q&As, live chats. Am I missing anything? Okay. And participants will be able to subscribe to areas that are of interest to them. So that will allow the town to target groups that have that particular interest or expertise. And this is really where we can cast our widest net and sort of gauge the pulse of a huge segment of our community in a short period of time with minimal effort. But we know that that's not the only tool that we need. We can't sacrifice that more, the in-depth kind of rich in-person feedback that we get out of the advisory committee models. So we need tactics that are going to fulfill that need, but also reach communities that maybe are not as comfortable participating in the online sphere. So what we're proposing is that in-person consultations do remain a core part of that broader public engagement effort, but we think that that can be done in a way that's a lot more flexible and with a broader range of opportunities than the advisory committees can provide. So what we want to look to are more towards our working groups, steering committees, these types of models that might bear some similarities to the advisory committees, but will have a bit of a better defined mandate and scope, so more of like a project-specific approach. So these would typically be assembled by staff for a specific purpose. So for example, to help shape the town's age-friendly strategy, our Parks and Rec master plan, our downtown secondary plan. So more of like a stakeholder approach where you would have the right partners around the table, but also a mix of just ordinary people from the community that, as members of the community, also have a stake in those projects. And the staff liaison assigned to that could determine what format, what level of formality meets their need in that case. So perhaps in some cases it's appropriate to have minutes. Perhaps that more formal committee-style meeting makes sense, where you have a presentation followed by a Q&A. But maybe not. Maybe it's more of like an activity-based or a brainstorm or something a little bit less formal. So this is the kind of flexibility that we're looking for. And so, yeah, it would be more of a situation-specific approach to consultation. We also see a role for more ad hoc tactics. So like focus groups or some of the pop-ups that you've seen communications do in the past, those can make a little more sense in some circumstances where we're not dealing with a super complex issue that requires maybe months and months of consultation. It's just kind of a quicker one. So something like the on-street parking permit system, where we just want to know what people think. We did pop-ups for that. Cannabis, we were on quite a tight timeline there. So this is the kind of tactic that would work in those cases. And then volunteerism. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of our volunteers are looking more for that action-oriented opportunity. Our volunteer program has matured significantly since I've been here. We have a fantastic volunteer database with all kinds of opportunities posted all the time. So we would see people with that interest being directed more towards the volunteer database. As far as the benefits, I think I've spoken to them a little already, but it's really the flexibility. So getting out of that monthly chug, free from those municipal act constraints, and offering way more opportunities for a broader range of people to participate and choose more specifically which projects and initiatives they're interested in weighing in on. And again, the format of those consultations could be more fun, more engaging. They can be held at a broader range of locations. We have so many great locations in the town where you can hold some of these consultation activities. Our community centers, our pavilions. You can't really do that with advisory committees because they're part of the transparency regime under the Municipal Act. They should have a regular meeting schedule at the same location. This is the kind of stifling piece that I'm talking about. So in our view, all of this will really equal a better engagement experience for our participants, better quality feedback for us, and people like Sarah and the staff liaisons within the departments can really focus their energies on those engagement tactics that are actually adding value rather than sitting at a computer pumping out six sets of minutes every month and managing attendance and those types of things. So you've seen the report. What we're basically proposing is that of course, we keep the statutory committees that we're required to have, but we replace those discretionary committees, so the 4 other committees, with sort of these more flexible models that I've outlined. And then Sarah's just going to outline some changes that we're also proposing to the committees that we're meeting with remain.
Thanks, Nicole. So as part of the review that we conduct as staff with our advisory committee members, as well as the staff liaisons to the committees, on an annual basis, we have sort of an informal check-in to see how their experience has been to date, but also a more comprehensive review is undertaken sort of towards the onset of the end of that term as a wrap-up. So in spring of 2018, staff did consult with all existing advisory committee members, as well as a separate meeting with our staff liaisons to determine some of those challenges that had been reoccurring throughout the term that Nicole has mentioned today. And we've taken a look at those internally and come up with a couple of proposed changes, as we do have several advisory committees moving forward with that same statutory structure. But we did want to make sure that we were listening to the concerns that were presented and are proposing the following. So we have suggested meeting schedule adjustments. There were some concerns identified because we're a large commuter population. Those that are commuting back into the city weren't making the 6 o'clock start time, it was too early, so we're looking to shift that a little bit and alleviate that pressure to get to a meeting on time. Looking at, again, our attendance management policy, so making it so that, that your absences are a consecutive rate of missed meetings, so that we do, it's currently a consecutive missed meeting, but we're looking to expand that to a total number of meetings to attend per year, so that we do have that flexibility. It is a voluntary position, but you are monitoring that a little bit more closely in terms of who is actively participating and attending. Looking at updating the code of conduct and conflict of interest procedures. Again, as Nicole mentioned, there's new legislative changes coming into effect at the beginning of March, so we will have to embed that into the processes with the advisory committee structure as well. Another item that came through in the report was the position of the chair and the vice chair in these particular committee settings. Can be an interesting dynamic. So to make sure that we're offering fair and equitable leadership opportunities for all of our members, looking at moving towards a voluntary rotation schedule as opposed to an election or an appointment of that particular position. Also looking at improvements to how we're reporting the events and the results and feedback coming from these committees to council. We've tried several different methods in the past. We've had full meeting minutes coming as a part of the council agenda, and that, again, with 6 committees, does become quite cumbersome on a monthly basis. And then the delay in having them have to be approved prior to them coming to council. So looking at creating a more succinct, descriptive report on the meeting business of the advisory committees that comes to council on a more regular basis to keep you involved and engaged in what's going on in terms of your business. And also looking at expanding the opportunities for remote meeting participation, but only within the same confines that it is applicable to council members as well, just to create some other opportunities for engagement. You might be aware that we are currently conducting our recruitment for our statutory committees. That commenced on January 7th and actually closes today. We undertook a number of tactics similar to our communications methods, including social media. We had a constant contact e-blast, which does include all of the volunteers within the volunteer database as well. There's advertiser community pages, notifications, sort of our standard outreach there. Applications will be reviewed by the staff members that are directly involved in that liaison capacity with the statutory committees. We will then look to a short list of candidates and conduct in-person or telephone interviews, and we will be starting those as early as this week. We're working on a bit of a tight timeline. As of 1 o'clock this afternoon, I believe we had 37 expressions of interest within the system. We have approximately up to 30 appointment opportunities available for the 4 statutory committees. So we look under our aggressive timelines here to come forward with a closed session report to the February 19th General Government Committee with staff's proposed recommendations for appointment. And then we will hit the ground running and get our new recruits in place with the orientation and our first meetings to anticipate to be starting in March of 2019.
So that concludes our presentation, and 3 of us are here. If you have any questions for any of us, Rachel hasn't chimed in too much, but she's certainly the go-to if there's any questions about what some of those new tactics will look like.
Regional Councillor Crawford.
So with all of this lightened up work, does Sarah have enough to do?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So I didn't get into it too much today, but we have talked at length between our two departments about what Sarah's role will look like should council approve recommendations today. And what we really envision is Sarah being basically the go-to for all public consultation that the town does and all of our, basically the deployment of all these initiatives. So that doesn't mean being a meeting secretary and taking minutes, but it means really being the architect of what those consultations look like. So getting the right people around the table and recruiting for that, designing the actual consultation initiative. So what kind of activities, maybe there's a theme, those types of questions. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, and the public engagement platform and everything will be separate from that, but it's really, Sarah would be the go-to for departments if they want to bring in a group to talk about transportation initiatives, and she would be the one that would be able to assemble them and really give best practices on how they can engage with those stakeholders.
And you're still involved with the statutory meetings, correct? Right, so they're pretty involved, I imagine, too.
The two statutory committees, from an advisory committee perspective moving forward, are probably our busiest out of all of them in terms of the workload, in terms of the output, so they will keep you on my toes for sure.
Yeah, well, Sarah was loved by all.
Yes.
Love is loved by all. Not
One
was
thing
loved
I
by
will
all.
add as
Is
well.
loved by all.
She's right there.
Yeah, right here.
That is true. And if I could just add also, Sarah kind of wears two hats as our committee coordinator and our accessibility compliance coordinator, which is a huge and growing portfolio that takes up a ton of time. So Sarah's one of the busiest people in our department, and I'm confident that won't change.
One question I had, more around, I don't know, I guess call it optics. The Diversity and Community Engagement Committee was one of those committees that was put together, I believe, after a survey went out, if I'm not mistaken. And we didn't fare well in this, and I believe the committee was set up, am I wrong? Go ahead, no, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I thought this committee was set up because of that survey. I'm wondering, how is, I've never been on the committee myself, so can't speak to what is discussed in the meeting, but just curious as to how that will be explained out to the community.
Okay. Sorry, until I was going up to address the other.
If you need me to weigh in on timing and rationale.
Okay, perfect. So, yes, now with Jay in that position, being within the office of the CAO, there's more opportunity now to really ensure that the diversity and the community engagement pieces are happening in a coordinated way when it comes to any sort of high-profile initiatives or anything like that. So, in terms of communicating that out, the advisory committees have already been informed that there could be some changes that are coming. So, following whatever council decides on today, we have a full plan in terms of just communicating that out to them, that we are moving to a more robust consultation model.
Okay.
And then, sorry Tracy, if you want to weigh in on the,
So through the chair, so the DACE committee actually predates the diversity plan. So way back in sort of the history of the town, it first was, I believe, race relations committee. So it's actually been around a really long time. It evolved to be the diversity and community engagement committee, and then that committee, there was an offshoot of that committee, which I actually had the opportunity to co-chair with Mohammed Karatella years ago, prior to my time at the town, which was the steering committee for the development of the DACE plan. So it actually goes back decades. The survey that you're referring to was actually one of our embryonics polling surveys.
Was that like 2 terms ago?
Yeah, I believe it was
Last year.
at the end of phase 1 of the plan. It was
Yeah.
actually, there were some challenges around the wording of the question.
Okay.
That came back, and it actually asked the question, is there possibly barriers of the town? It didn't ask, are there barriers of the town? So there was people didn't know how to answer it, because they're like, well, yeah, there could be barriers of the town.
That's
So
not
it was a
the survey
weird
then.
question. Yeah, so they actually don't have anything to do with each other,
Oh,
but,
okay.
yeah, it's a decade, yeah, it's
Okay.
been around a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Regional Councilor Dice.
Oh, thank you. So, congratulations, I know you wanted to update us in our model, which is a good thing, and I know that over the years, Sarah, you fine-tuned it over and over again and have made incredible improvements to the process, and thank you for that. But it's interesting that the same challenges remain the same challenges despite our efforts. So I understand the need going forward, and I guess I just want to get a feel for who makes the determination of what's going to be a working group or an ad hoc, what kind of issues, that kind of thing? So you still are sure that we're bringing in that, what constituents are saying. We're hearing it and we're listening and go, okay, we need to do this. Like, how are you going to determine that?
I'll take that one. So through the chair, what will happen if a department does have an initiative or something that they'd like to go and consult with, they would meet with our teams to determine what would be the best way to roll that out. So if there's like a high profile environmental initiative, so for example, the climate adaptation plan that's coming out shortly, if there's an opportunity that we do want to bring in stakeholders to engage with as part of that, as part of the community's engagement piece of that, then we would bring them in and work with them. So it really is going to be sort of evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And of course, through the strategic plan as well, council will be setting what the priorities are for the term, and that'll really help to inform the consultation that we'll be doing depending on what the topic is.
So through you, Mr. Chair. Just one more, then, and that makes sense, but we know that there are differences in our community, so we'll be taking that into account too, because what we might hear or see on social media won't necessarily always be the case in another area.
Yeah, definitely. I just can just address that one point. So while we do have an online platform, there is going to be many different other tactics that we'll be deploying, just because not everything is social media and online, that we do need to be doing that face-to-face, and we do need to be going out to the community as well. So we are doing a broad spectrum of consultation and making sure that we are getting to all of those various stakeholders.
It's a big change for AJAX, and I think people who have volunteered in the past will be worried that their voice may not be heard. So it's really critical that that they know that's not the case.
Yeah, just further to that point, as part of the the online public engagement platform, residents can create a profile. So they're instantly notified of any opportunities to provide their feedback or to get involved with any initiatives. So if there are residents that are very much interested in community safety, the environment, economic development, they would be notified immediately of these opportunities. And we're really going to be having a big push to get them involved and to really build that database. So I think this is a huge opportunity now for more people to get involved and to really feel like their voices are being heard and that they are informing a lot of the decisions that we're making.
Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very glad to see this come forward. I think the advisory committees have done well and served a very useful purpose, but I think we've seen them change, especially in this last term, and I think we need to change with it. So I'm glad to see this come forward. I think we can make much better use of staff and volunteer time by having more focused groups. And yeah, quorum has been an issue. I'm surprised in the report that the Youth Engagement Advisory Committee is not a committee of council.
So it used to be at one time, but it really, you can probably speak to this better than I can actually, but it operated quite differently than the other committees. It was, the members were appointed on an annual basis, and that was frankly one of the models that kind of inspired the new approach, is that when you take it out of that sort of sphere of being a committee of council, it just really opens the doors as far as how that committee can operate in a way that makes sense for them. So it's still alive and well. It's supported within the Recreation and Culture Department, and yeah, it's really a perfect example actually of what the new model is all about.
Just to add to that, that was sort of a transition that came through at one of our previous end-of-term comprehensive reviews for the committee structure, and sort of delegating that to a more direct departmental consultation approach has been very effective. And as Nicole mentioned, being a youth-based membership, they are super engaged and really have that more action-oriented approach to their consultation, which didn't really fit well within that sort of bureaucratic structure of what an advisory committee does. So just to echo the success of that committee and sort of as that more flexible model is what we could see moving forward.
My son was on that one, he really enjoyed it. Where are we as far as recruitment?
Through the chair for our current statutory committees, closes today, and again, 37 expressions of interest have been received as of 1 p.m. this afternoon. Okay. And then aggressively, we will be looking to schedule interviews starting as early as Thursday, and they will wrap up
mid-next week, and staff will be preparing a report for circulation to come to the closed session of February 19th, GGC.
In the past, members of council have formed part of the interview committee. Is that going to be the case again?
If that is something that council would like to take part in, we do have quite an aggressive timeline for interviews, so it is a fairly set schedule. But if council members would like to sit in on those interviews, I don't foresee there's an issue. It has been something that's been open in the past if there's anybody who would expressly like to take part.
Okay. And just growing with the way we're growing and the way we're changing, some of the committees have had the same people and the same people and the same people. And I thought we had started term limits.
Through the
At
chair,
some
term
point.
limits are currently in place for the quasi-judicial boards, because there's a monetary stipend remuneration that is received by those members, and that was something that came through, again, through the review at the end of a committee term review. It wasn't extended to our advisory committees because we were fearful that in sort of that ebb and flow of community engagement, we didn't want to put restrictions in place where we would be in a position where we wouldn't have anybody to sit on statutory committees. But through the policy and through staff liaison review, we do continue to strive for that balance of returning membership as well as new membership. We see that there's a definite benefit to have that continued leadership and that legacy component for the success of the committee, but also balancing that with new ideas and voices and people who want to be engaged within our community.
Do you feel with the number of applicants you've received so far, there's enough? Like, will you have to turn anybody away, or
Through the chair,
is there enough
with
to fill all the
potential
positions?
37 expressions of interest and only 30 seats, yes, people will be turned away.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's sort of the nature of the beast. It has been much higher in previous years where we had maybe 3 applicants to every seat available, which that's sort of a worst case scenario when you're turning even more people away. But we do always encourage their participation through other means. We'd be speaking to the public engagement platform, our volunteer portal, as we have done in the past, so because we really don't want to lose that engagement spark or extinguish it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything about participation in the review.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think, you're quite right. In the past, the council member appointed to a particular committee has been invited to participate in the interviews. I don't believe that's ever been the case for the quasi-judicial boards because they operate so independently from council under delegated authority. If there is a desire for, like, you folks have already been appointed to the 2 statutory committees, being the heritage and the accessibility, so we can certainly reach out individually to the members that have been appointed to those committees. And if you personally would like to participate, Mayor Collier, you could let us know, and we can let you know when the interviews are scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions? I have a few questions. I'd like to start off by saying thanks to Sarah. I sat on Recreation Culture, if you didn't know.
You were the chair.
Were you the chair?
I was the chair for 4 years. I saw you address that.
And in case anybody forgot, you reminded them.
Yes, I did, just now. But Sarah was focused. I know it's not a question, it's a comment. She was focused, and her spirit, her energy, and everything was amazing. And it's probably the only reason why all these exist. So thank you so much for that. Also, thank you for the report, because looking through it, it pretty much addressed a lot of the things that we would speak about from time to time at committee. But moving forward, on to my question. So current recruitment, as Mayor Collier has asked. So if there are 30 spots, you end up leaving out 6 or 7 people. Moving forward to the steering committees, would we go back into that pool and maybe have a new recruitment for that? Like if we're going with sort of split between the 4 and the 4 that we sort of have to do, there's going to be 4, figure out. So you would have a new recruitment for like September kind of
So
thing?
as part of these like focus groups and things like that we're putting together, there wouldn't necessarily be recruitment for it. We would be putting it out to the community for them to be involved. So we wouldn't want to be turning away anybody from
Right.
participating in any of these focus groups. Now, if there's an ad hoc committee that it makes sense that we're developing an ad hoc committee, then that would be a different process for it. But just in terms of going out to the community, giving people the opportunity to be involved and provide their feedback, we wouldn't be looking at like recruitment or anything like that. We're just getting involved through
Okay.
focus groups or stakeholder sessions and
Right.
things like that. Yeah.
And as Mayor Collier said about youth, I've often thought, I guess pose it as a question, if there would ever be a committee or something for seniors. Like it's never been there. And it seems, yeah, this is Tracy's one question. And economic development, which maybe would pull it too far over.
So through the chair for seniors, yes, we have. So we've always ensured there is a representative from the seniors community on a number of our overarching plans. When we did the recreation services strategy, we had a number of consultations. Rod, to Rachel's point, and invited as well to ensure that we had really good representation and comment from the seniors hub. As I mentioned as well to council orientation, we will be moving forward with our age-friendly community planning. So that will also involve feedback, consultation, and involvement and participation from the community at large. So we would see sort of a really good, robust role for seniors in that aspect as well. So definitely that would be coming down the pipe.
And my last question / comment. So whatever these turn out to be, obviously the 4 that are going to be there, I think there needs to be something in place where at least, I shouldn't say at least, but senior directors or somebody hears what the committee's doing. Because a lot of times it just sort of floated out there, the next meeting would come and would float out there. Whether or not it gets to council or whether or not it gets to the department heads, we're going, well, you know, this specifically. So I don't know if that's tasking the committees on each subject, saying, we want you to weigh in on this, or what's your thoughts on this, and then actually having an actual function. Just something to consider.
Through the chair, from a staff perspective, I know that we are looking to improve that communication process in terms of the business and the discussion that's happening at those committees being communicated to council and again by extension to department heads. It's also been the role of the staff liaison to make sure that they're taking back the pertinent feedback to their department, share with their colleagues, their managers and directors as well. But if there's further suggestions, and then, even thirdfold, the council representatives that sit on that committee as well have that responsibility within their role to sort of help close that communication loop as well. So but if you have further suggestions, it is something that we have identified for improvement through the report, and we're going to try and take a look at a different approach, similar to sort of a regional council type of report that comes forward, so that there is a little bit more detail. You don't have to read through all the minutes, but still the substantive information in summation will be provided so that you can follow.
Yeah, I concur. Just a brief summation, the way we hear regional council reports.
Yes.
Saying what's the report on committee of adjustment. Okay, so are there any questions? More questions on this? There being none, can I get a mover for the recommendations in the report? Regional council committee. And I call the vote. All those in favor? Okay, the motion carries. So we have an additional item, Ajax Auto Wreckers. Mayor Collier will speak to the item first.
Thank you, Chair. And I sent you all an email, I think on Friday, just saying I was going to be adding this item. And also, I believe the clerk shared the last GGC minutes and recommendations from, I guess, the last time this was dealt with by council, which was June 12, 2017. So this goes back to 1999?
1996.
1996.
Prior to 96.
When Ajax Council of the Day did not or withdrew the license for Ajax Auto Wreckers on Westney Road, they relocated to the new site on Dowdy, I believe, and through the courts, they appealed the decision, and through the courts, these minutes of settlement were drafted between the town and Ajax Auto Wreckers, and they still are in effect today. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
Okay. Now, since then, this company has changed a lot. They are no longer just an auto recycling. Now they are a complete recycling facility, to my understanding. They employ, I believe, 16 people full-time, and it's quite a bit different business than it was back then. Is that accurate as well?
Yeah, back when the minutes of settlement were entered into, or even when they were on Westney Road, they were predominantly vehicle salvage, right? Derelict, unused, sell them, bring them here, get your money, crush them, ship them off to wherever.
Right.
That still is a component of Ajax Auto Wreckers, but it's not all that they do. They take other ferrous, non-ferrous metals, sort them. The real expensive stuff is stored in the building that's on the property because people steal it. And the other component, people are if you go there, or if you've ever been there, there's people just, here's my washer and dryer, got a new washer and dryer. They're just driving up and dropping it on the pile, and the thing just, tractor or whatever, their front end loader there, just piling it up. So there's that element, salvage. And they cut it all up and shred it, put it through a shredder, and it piles up until a steel company or producer wants to buy it from Ajax Auto Wreckers or any of the other types of facilities that operate this way. And then it gets shipped out to that facility.
And this is where we're having the issue now, is those are commodities. And I know, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, where Lasco Steel's main machine that crushes everything up went down for a few months. And during that time, they weren't able to sell the product, so it accumulated and it stacked up. And there's a neighbor that is not friendly to the operation and puts in frequent bylaw complaints, and bylaw have been dealing with this since 2014. And this keeps getting kicked down the field, and it's to do with the fence height. And this keeps getting kicked down, so bylaw has laid charges, and it keeps getting adjourned. Is that the right word there? And June 12th, with the stuff, the minutes that were sent to council on yesterday by the clerk, the last one was that the amendment to the minutes of settlement not be approved, and that staff be directed to investigate other process and design details that may address the town's compatibility concerns. And have you been able to do that yet?
So since June of 2017, staff did consult, investigate other processes and design alternatives. We met with Mr. Monahan, we being myself and Bruno Scopacasa, our senior planner, and discussed several options on the property. Shipping containers being stacked to screen material, concrete blocks that have the rebar that then can be all stacked up to screen material that's being stored on the property. Yeah, so we've had those conversations with Mr. Monahan, but those are not solutions that planning sees as being appropriate to screen the materials that are being stored on the property.
I don't think anybody wants to see shipping containers stacked up to screen material. The fence height to me is the issue, and being restricted at 8 feet right now, if that were to be allowed to go to the 11 feet, which was what was in the original report in June of 17, does that go against, I mean, it's an industrial area, it's right in the middle. Is that contravening any planning act or anything to allow that, or is it just a matter of amending the minutes of settlement?
It's not contravening anything in the planning act. There's fence bylaws, and there's an OPA, an official plan amendment in place, and a zoning bylaw amendment in place, and minutes of settlement that are in place that outline these height requirements. And in order to amend any of those performance standards within any of those documents, it would have to have a resolution of council to move forward with those amendments. And if those amendments were the ones that were put forward through the request back in June of 2017, and council directed staff to make those changes accordingly, then that would be council's direction to staff.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to look to the clerk for just direction on this, because I have a motion, but I understand that this requires a motion to reconsider. So would we move the motion to reconsider first?
Yes.
Okay, so would I move that?
Yes.
So I would like to move a motion to reconsider, and if it's approved by 2/3, then I will have a motion that I'll read after that. So I'll make that motion, sure.
Are there any questions? I was going to ask. Okay, so
Sure.
do we do that? Do we do questions
You know what,
first?
I'll withdraw that. Let's do the questions first, and then I'll.
Right, that's what I thought. So Regional Councilor Lee.
It seems to be one neighbor who's doing the bulk of the complaining.
I don't want to point fingers.
Can I ask, can we put it on the mic?
I think it is.
And do we know who the neighbor is then?
Yes.
Are we allowed saying, or, oh, we're not allowed saying, okay, got it,
It
okay.
doesn't matter.
Okay.
Well,
But
Mr.
out of all the neighbors, it seems just to be the one complaining for the most part. Or is this a case where it's like everyone around them seems to be complaining? Just so I know.
Through the chair, I won't get into specifics, but there is more than one complaint.
Okay.
And the recent one that brought us to the property, I say recent, about 4 years ago, wasn't the immediate neighbor, it was somebody else within the.
Got it. Thank you.
Who's your Councilor Dawes?
So, I think personally, over the years, we've had many concerns with this property. And the fencing has been an issue for a long time, if I recall. So, right from the beginning, when they put the fencing in, did they not know the height that was allowed within our bylaws?
Through the chair, the minutes of settlement were negotiated on both sides, they knew the requirements. And currently, our charges aren't about the fence height, our charges are about the materials on the property over stack.
Well, that was my next question.
So even at 12 feet, the material is still well over 12 feet. And I think in your report that was circulated, shows those pictures with the material clearly over 12.
But by the minutes of settlement, the property owner knew and they agreed to that, and they agreed to stack to those limits as well, but they've gone beyond that over the years, time and time again, because we have had one concern expressed. Is that not true?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So what's to say if we raise that fence even higher, he may go beyond that limit. I mean, that's a risk we're gonna have to take. We've had other issues with this property owner that has not conformed with our bylaws. And one was recently with some contaminated waste that we didn't include the one. Trying to refresh my memory here. But, so there's more than one thing happening on this property. And the issue's gonna be, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in that it's with growth, some industries and some businesses kind of get squeezed out. So in that area in particular, my concern with allowing those heights, those piles to go even higher, because it is a wrecking yard, is the fact that in our downtown core, we've identified areas for redevelopment that will include residential. And there's some not far from there, if I'm not mistaken. So how is that going to be compatible in the future if we keep raising the fence limit?
We haven't raised it.
How is that going to be compatible if we keep raising the fence limit? Well, it moves further away from the compatibility that we want to achieve, because it further entrenches that use on that property. And I believe the whole intent of entering into the minutes of settlement and putting it in the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw was to establish the intensity that we wanted the property to develop at. By increasing the height of the fence or allowing things to be piled higher than what the maximums are, that further intensifies that use. It means that use is there operating above the exceedances that have already been permitted, and it moves further away from the goals and objectives of our official plan with land uses that are in close proximity to this, central Ajax employment area, which is the area that we're talking about here between Westing Road, the Go Node, and the downtown.
So as we redevelop and there's more residential, it's easy to say, well, it was there when you bought the property, you should have known. But the fact is you didn't. If we keep going where we're going. And I think the other issue is my concern that the owner knows the limits and he just has ignored them for quite a number of years now, so that's problematic.
Through the chair, I just wanted to mention, we are actually reviewing a development application that's less than about 150 meters away from this property, right at the edge of our downtown, at the corner of Hunt Street and Monarch. And it's for 111 townhouses, and the majority of those townhouses are 4 stories high.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because you're increasing the density. Thank you.
Any further questions on that? Councilor Bauer?
Thank you. Some of the questions have already been answered. But when the minutes of settlement first came into play, that was pre-1996. Is that correct?
2001 is when minutes of settlement were entered into. They were as a result of town revoking his license, and he appealed, Ajax Auto Wreckers appealed that revoking of the license, and the minutes of settlement were as a result of the court proceedings.
Okay. So since 2001, when those minutes of settlement came into effect, has the business owner complied with them? Like, I know he's not now, but initially, like, was there compliance ever?
I think there, you know, in reading the report and going through some of the history of everything, there may have been compliance at some point following the issuance of the minutes of settlement, but that didn't last for very long until they were exceeded. So I think there were some inspections done by Bylaw Services following the entering the minutes of settlement. There was a site plan application. There was a fire on the property that removed one of the buildings. So there's a lot of stuff that had happened between 2001 and I think 2013 or 14 when these current charges that are currently being pursued were laid. But there was compliance at one point, but then it exceeded compliance with those requirements because the business changed. It didn't go from just wrecking vehicles. It's now going into this other component of the business, the shredding and storage and, you know, transportation of other types of metals.
Because there's also, I believe it said, as well as wanting a higher fence, there's also product outside, like in front of the building, which goes against the minutes of settlement. Is that right? There shouldn't be anything outside?
Well, right now the minutes of settlement just regulate fence height and storage of and stacking of vehicles,
Okay.
wrecked vehicles. The request that was put forward in 2017 was to increase the height of the fence from I think 2.2 to 3.5.
Okay.
Or 2.2 for the storage of material to 3.5 for the storage of material. And then from the fence from 2.4 meters to 3.6 meters. And then there was an additional request put forward in June where the Ajax Auto Wreckers wanted to have the temporary storage of shredded salvage at a height of 5 meters. And this is the pile, this is the new component of the business. This is the pile that goes down, then gets higher, then it all depends on the market and who's buying that particular product. So it could sit there. They're gonna, I'm assuming the business would want to sell it at the highest, best price to get the best money for that. So
Right.
that pile could stay there. Or maybe who they're selling the product to is an accepting product right now, so it kind of has to be stored there.
Okay. And then when you had negotiations with them regarding the cinder block or the wall and the shipping containers.
Yeah.
But that idea, whose ideas were those? Like,
Those were Ajax Auto Wreckers. Other suggestions that we
Yeah, what are suggestions?
proposed to Ajax Auto Wreckers, one that wouldn't require any amendments to the minutes of settlement or reapply for an official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment, was to build a building to store your salvage in.
Oh, okay.
And that would be a site plan approval, and we could process that internally. There wouldn't be a need to amend the minutes of settlement or amend the official plan or zoning bylaw, because now everything would be internalized, and you could build a building 50 feet high if you wanted to on this property to store your salvage material in.
Okay. But the.
That wasn't something that Ajax Auto Wreckers wanted to pursue.
So I just, forgive me, but I just want to understand what we're actually voting on today.
Haven't got there yet.
So, oh yeah, we haven't got there yet? Okay. So based on our vote, something happens or something doesn't happen?
We'll wait to
Is that
repeal
right?
first.
Clarify what they're.
I have a motion I want to bring forward to make some changes, but first we're just doing questions and then I'll bring them.
So is there more negotiation, or that's it? The town had some ideas, auto records didn't like it, auto records had some ideas, and the town, it went against what we want for that, our plan for that area.
And from a planning point of view, we don't see there being any room for negotiation. We believe that the minutes of settlement that were agreed to by both parties in 2001 are it. If we were to write a report again today at the request of council, it would probably look a lot like the report in June of 2017, which is the report that was distributed to council.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Mr. Romanowski, that report has a 12-foot fence.
That report,
8-foot fence.
the request that was put forward by Ajax Auto Wreckers was for 3.6 meters. It's about 11, that's about 4 feet.
Okay. And maybe this is for Mr. Hannon. Is the fence just being asked for the southerly? Like if you look at it, it's a massive pie-shaped lot.
Yes.
So is it talking about ribbon the whole thing, seal it off at 8 feet?
Mr. Chair, the issue that came up in the past is that areas weren't covered by a fence, which we had to mandate and demand that they construct areas that weren't protected by that wood fence to begin with. So Mr. Monahan had to build his fence completely around the property.
Right.
And the issue that we have is, even if the fence were to go to 12 feet, his material on that property is still way higher than that 12 feet. So to open up anything that talks about maximizing or allowing him to increase the size of the fence has to go part and parcel with what's happening with the materials on the site, because it's still over that height now, and that has been addressed with Mr. Monahan for the last 4 years, that even increasing the fence height is not going to screen the materials. And in answer to Councillor Bauer's point, since the early 2010, we've been working with the Ajax Auto Wreckers about the fence material, about the property heights in there. And it's only been since about 2014 that he's become unresponsive to town requests to have that lowered, including such statements in meetings that he will not lower down his material until the price value is adequate for him to move. He sees it as a huge loss in profit by selling it when the market's low. So now when we go in as of 2014, 2015 and ask him to lower the piles, he's adamant. And to his credit, he's completely honest, saying, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not lowering down that. So all the discussions I've been involved with about lifting up the height of the fence has always been, but that's still not removing the material on site.
Yeah, it's almost a different subject, actually. I think we all have more questions. You have Councillor Dice.
Just one follow-up.
Regional Councillor Dice.
If I may, the shredded material that you say is new, can you kind of, I can't visualize it. Is it small pieces that are being shredded? Like I have no idea what you
It's
mean by
washers
shredded.
and dryers and refrigerators, and it could be, it's scrap metal, it could be aluminum siding that someone's ripped off their house because they renovated it. These are the things that are coming there. It could be doors from cars, it could be flashing, it can be roofing material that they're using, it could be anything that's salvageable.
No, I just wondering if it was going to be a wind issue as well, because when the piles do get higher, then there are issues with that. So I just,
If the
I
winds were
don't
strong
know.
enough, I guess,
I
like
have-
hurricane force
Okay.
winds and to lift metal up, I
So
guess that
probably
could be.
not. Okay, thanks.
So if there's no more questions, then I guess we'll move on. A motion to reconsider, right?
Well, I do have a couple of the questions.
Okay, sorry, Mayor Colley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to staff, this is a unique situation. There's no other business in Ajax that is saddled by minutes of settlement. Is that correct? Like this
I
business.
can't say that for sure.
This business
Minutes
is
of
under-
settlement from the Ontario Supreme Court. I would assume that this would be one of the only properties. There are other properties in the town that are subject to minutes of
But
settlement,
this is-
probably from the Ontario Municipal
This
Court.
one property is limited by those minutes of settlement. They cannot seek relief through committee of adjustment. the only way they can seek relief to any changes to minutes of settlement is through council resolution.
Correct.
Okay. So this is not like any of these other businesses. This is a unique situation. Back when these minutes were signed in 2000-ish, the business was an auto crushing facility. It was a much smaller business. It was what it was, and at the time when the minutes of settlement, I guess, were signed, would it be fair to say that the requirements in the minutes of settlement, or the stipulations in the minutes of settlement, probably met the needs of the business at that time?
I can only assume so.
Approximately, yeah. But now, 18 years later, it's a different business. It's a grown business. It employs a lot more people. And with that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, would it be fair to say that it's outgrown those limitations in the original minutes of settlement just due to growth? Is that what we're talking about here? That's what I see.
Well, I guess it could have outgrown the minutes of settlement, but to the same effect, maybe he's outgrown his property to operate his business, because his business has changed.
Perhaps. I don't know that I want to see a 50-foot high building. I mean, that would be many, many millions of dollars to build versus adding a couple of feet height to a fence. And I agree, it's not just a fence, it's a pile head as well, and I addressed both in the motion. But I just want to make that clarification that this is a unique situation, and the only relief to it is through amending the minutes of settlement because it's of that uniqueness.
Well, if it wasn't for the
Ron, you
minutes of
wanna add
settlement. Go ahead.
Through the chair. The issue of compatibility is essentially a planning issue. For them to apply to get a minor variance or a rezoning, correct, they need to amend the minutes of settlement because they can't make that application. They could make it, they could have the committee approve it, but they can't apply what the committee approves because we have minutes of settlement that restrict it.
Right.
If you amend your minutes of settlement, however, you're still going to have these planning issues of compatibility. And you're probably then going to get the same type of report that Mr. Romanowski has already talked about. Staff is not going to support, I assume, a change to the, either by way of a minor variance or rezoning, because they still have the compatibility issues.
What
So that's not
exactly
going to
are
change.
these compatibility issues? Are they subjective? Is there something specifically in the Planning Act that says this compatibility?
Well, planning's not a science. It's an art. Is it subjective? It's subjective based on our policies that we have within our official plan, right? We have certain criteria, goals and objectives that we've set out. We have a downtown where this development, this operation is right on the fringe of. We're going through a municipal comprehensive review with the region, an official plan review that will follow at the town level. We're looking into expanding our downtown or understanding what the impacts of expanding it would be through downtown area secondary plan. We're looking at expanding the GO node. We're looking at shrinking maybe this central Ajax employment area. There's Hunt Street extension, so we're planning on having a main corridor where Hunt Street's gonna go right by this auto wrecker, and it's gonna be a nice thing to see for all of our commuters that are going from our downtown to the GO train station. So these are gonna be all the elements that are factored into a report that we would write to convey whether or not we felt it was compatible or not.
But this existing business is operating under the current zoning.
Yep. Wow.
They conform to the current zoning of the site.
Well, they're being charged for not complying.
The requirements in zoning still stipulate fence heights and.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I mean, the land that they're on is zoned
The use
for-
is permitted.
Yeah, the use is permitted.
So we can't, as a council, unless we expropriate it, kick that out. So whether we run a road down Hunt Street by them or not, if Steve Monahan doesn't choose to sell and move, they're gonna be there regardless.
Yep.
Okay. So to me, and I haven't made the motion, I don't wanna speak to it, but, I'd rather look at a fence than a stack of shipping containers or a stack of cement blocks, but notwithstanding, they're operating currently under the zoning they have. They are legal to be there, and there's nothing we can do to make them leave.
Right.
So
The
for
uses are
compatibility,
permitted.
we've already, council in the late 90s have already given permission for them to be there. And that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the height of the material and the height of the fence. Eventually, when I get to the motion.
That's what we're talking about, but as I stated before, we believe that the minutes of settlement and the OPA and the zoning bylaw that were a result of that established the intensity that we want the property to be developed at. So we would say if we were to prepare a report back to council with regards to compatibility, is that going higher would not achieve the compatibility that we'd be looking for within this part of the town.
But building a 50-foot high building would.
I don't know, that's not proposed, so we haven't been
No,
able to
but he
consider that under the
can,
planning.
within his rights today, put
It's
an
permitted, though.
application without changing anything.
Right,
And
that's
get the
permitted.
permit and build a massive building.
Yeah,
But because of the minutes of settlement, we can't add 2 feet to the fence.
yeah.
I'm
But
just trying to,
a
you know,
a building and a fence it's hard to make a direct connection between the two, right? A building would have articulation,
Yeah.
colors, different materials to create some interest, and that would
But
at least
ultimately,
lead to
Bruno,
some
it would
compatibility.
be a wall. It would be a tall wall, but it would be a wall.
Well,
the
that's
side
to
of that
say-
building.
That's to say every building in Ajax is a wall.
Okay, so
Some are
basically-
prettier to look at than
Okay.
others.
Thank you. Let's keep the motion, I guess.
Should we do that? Okay, so, you'll need to move a motion to reconsider.
I would like to move a motion to reconsider and then bring forward another motion after. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so a motion to reconsider's been done.
So I guess,
No.
sorry, like, how can I vote on reconsidering if I don't know if they have a motion?
Yeah.
And these are the rules, we have to do it this way, right?
Help me.
I think it would be helpful if Mayor Collier revealed what he's intending to bring
Okay.
forward, so we can establish that it indeed is contrary to an existing council decision.
Good call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the motion I would like to bring forward, should you allow a motion to reconsider. One, that staff be directed, and just to go back, this is exactly from the report in June of 2017. A, that staff be directed to amend the minutes of settlement between Ajax Auto Wreckers and the town of Ajax as followed. A, to permit outdoor storage of crushed vehicles to a maximum height of 3.5 meters, 11.5 feet. B, to permit the temporary outdoor storage of crushed, baled, and/or sheared salvage material to a maximum height of 5 meters, 16.4 feet. And C, to permit a maximum height of 3.6 meters, 12-foot fence on the perimeter of the subject property. 2, that staff be directed to accept and process official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications from Ajax Auto Wreckers. And 3, that council waive the fee for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. And I'll speak to that if I'm allowed to bring the motion forward.
Help me.
So you'll need a vote on the motion to reconsider, which requires 2/3 to pass.
Okay, so we're gonna have somebody, the motion's been applied, and now we have to vote on the motion.
Does the chair vote?
Yes, the chair does vote.
Okay, so a motion to reconsider requires a 2/3 vote, so all in favor?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So if we pass a motion to reconsider, then we look at the
It doesn't mean
verbiage
you're
there.
passing the motion.
It just means
Just means you're allowing the motion on the
I'm allowing the
floor.
conversation to happen.
Look at everything that Mayor Collier has
All
stated.
right. So yes, I vote to allow the, sorry.
Okay, the motion carries, we've got 2/3 vote.
Thank you, Chair. Just to speak to the motion, and we've spoken most of it, I won't take a lot more time. Again, this is a unique situation, and you're right, we can't address the fence height without addressing the pile height. And I think the business operator's been very clear with the town as to the nature of the business and the nature of the commodity, and the fact that sometimes, and in the case of Lasco Steel, or was it Jurdo, whichever it was, that was due to a plant shutdown. That was not something that could have been foreseen. But Regardless, there are times when the stacks are gonna be a little bit higher. And given the fence and the other, that would stop the neighbor that is annoyed by this from even seeing it, let alone complaining about it. Staff have spent a lot of time on this. Our bylaw staff have been dealing with this since 2014. So this is into the 5th year now. This is scheduled to go back to court again on Friday, Mr. Hammond. And I'm not speaking to the soil issues, because that's a complete separate thing, and that's gonna be dealt with through the court process. And that is that. We're talking about the fence and the minutes of settlement only, not about any other issues surrounding this site. Also, the fact when bullet number 3 here about the fee, Mr. Romanescu spoke about, we're currently going through the town official plan review, municipal comprehensive review, and whatnot. And when we spoke earlier, you had indicated to me that the cost on this would be nominal, considering we're already going through the other things we're changing next. Is that correct?
Well, nominal in the sense of whatever the fees prescribed within our zoning bylaw, or within our fee bylaw.
But you said this wouldn't be, or my understanding was this isn't like an official full
Well, it's
rezoning.
not, it's not like we're doing a subdivision and we have to consider it, but regardless of whether it's a subdivision or a technical amendment, the fee's still what the fee is.
Right.
So it would be in excess of $30,000 to do an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment.
Right, but in this case, help me here, what did you say in my office this before the meeting?
Well, you asked if
it was the same amount of work involved.
It's the same amount of work involved, and I said, well, in this case, it'd probably be more of a technical amendment, but there would be a component in there that we would have, like, we'd have to do a report, we'd have to have a public meeting, it would be a public process, we'd have to put it through that, but if we understand what we're focusing on, then we can focus the report on that. It may not take as long as,
Okay.
a 1,400 unit subdivision.
Okay. We've been through the thing, adjustments. Oh, I heard the mention of residential. There's no residential. This is a commercial area. This is an industrial area. They're operating there under their current zoning, tapped onto resources. Oh, I've spoken to how this business has changed over the last 18 years, and I've been around for 15 of those years, and I've seen this keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. And it's one of those things we keep kicking down the field, and I think it's time we just dealt with this once and for all. I ran, and many of us ran on economic development platforms, encouraging, helping businesses grow. This business has grown, and I think we need to grow with it. And the only way to allow this to move forward and to make this problem go away is to amend these minutes of settlement as I put. So I'd ask your support. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, Regional Councillor Lee.
If we move the fence out to 12 or 11.5 feet, there's still no guarantee that they'll,
Nope.
right? Have we received any kind of assurances that he would at least try to? And
There's no guarantee that there would, could you finish your sentence?
just like I
You
just
comply.
To comply with the height of the.
comply with like height, because they're currently not complying. The fence is what, 8 feet right now approximately,
If they don't comply, I'm hands off, go to town.
right? And what are we charging them? Like, what is a
Okay.
bylaw infraction? Like, what is a fine?
Through the chair, the current charge that we're in court with right now is having his storage materials too high on the property. There's also not only been convictions already been entered against the property, there's also a prohibition order against him from keeping those materials too high on site, which would be applied during this current court case we've been involved with for the last 4 years.
And with this changing through the chair, would Mayor Collier's amendment, would this affect the court case at all?
So the amendment would come in that obviously we wouldn't go ahead if council's wishes were directing staff to allow the storage pile to get higher. We're not going to apply a prohibition order if council directed staff to allow the pile to get higher.
But right now, we're not asking for the pile to get higher.
No.
We're asking for the fence to get higher.
No, B is allowing the pile to get higher.
And is there a limit in your amendment to how high you want the
Yeah, you
pile
said
to go?
It's 5 meters?
5 meters, which is 16 feet.
And through the chair, in 5 years, he hasn't complied with the height requirement.
So I just, like, my concern, obviously, and I don't disagree, like, you know, I'm definitely want to help businesses grow, but if he's currently not listening to us now, what assurances do we have that he'll listen and not, in theory, build a 20-foot pile of metal? There's no assurances, right, ultimately?
Joanne, if I may, Mr. Hawkshaw?
I would have a
Yes,
very
yes,
serious talk with you.
I want to make sure council is clear on what they can and can't do. In the minutes of settlement, you can allow him to build a higher fence if you want to. However, to do that, he's still going to have to amend the zoning bylaw that restricts the height of the fence. When the minutes of settlement were signed, part of it was specifically you're going to have the site rezoned that complies with the minutes of settlement. So the height restriction is in the zoning bylaw. If in your minutes you now say we're going to amend those and allow him to build a higher fence,
11 and a half feet.
11 and a half feet, number one, he still has to go and amend your zoning bylaw. Secondly, the public could say, you've already predetermined a planning act decision by amending it in your minutes of settlement. You haven't even taken the advice of staff in terms of compatibility. You predetermined the zoning. The zoning is a matter that comes to council through a public meeting. You have a hearing, you get a report, you listen to the public, then you make your decision. So if you're going to do anything with the minutes of settlement, I suppose all you could do is say, we want to remove the fence requirements, height, or the height of the stack from the minutes of settlement. That would then allow him to move forward with his zoning applications, and then you'll consider that at a public meeting in the normal course of a rezoning. But you can't just do it in the minutes of settlement, say, all right, now you can build a higher fence. Not going to happen. There's a process.
So,
Mayor Collier, sorry, Joanne. I'm gonna get to
would you suggest then, Ron, that we amend, like if I amended the motion, to just say, instead of putting heights, to just say that we remove the height restriction from the minutes of settlements, rather than actually state in the zoning? And then, because item 2 says that staff be directed to accept and process official plan amendments and zoning bylaw. I understand the applicant has to do that, and that's in here. But if I misworded the top part, I'm open to suggest.
Yeah, through the chair, I would suggest you amend the top part. I'm not saying, I'm not recommending you do it, but, or approve it. I'm just saying, yes, you need to change it. Because you're predetermining.
I'm not suggesting it, but you got to do it.
You need to change the way it's worded.
Regional Councilor Dias.
Okay, thank you. So I don't think raising the height of the fence is going to make this situation go away. He just doesn't want to play by the rules. He knows what the rules are, they're clear, and they have been clear all along. We're not against businesses by any means. Most of them play by the rules that are set out for them. This has been ongoing. There are different issues over years. I know his business has changed, but like I say, perhaps it's time that he looks maybe for a more appropriate piece of land where it's more compatible. But he clearly, this business does not want to comply because it has been an ongoing issue. And after what our lawyer states, I think I have to agree that, you know, we can't just change the fence, and he's got to learn to play by the rules.
Okay. Regional Councilor Crawford.
I'm prepared to offer an amendment, whatever you said at the beginning. I'm prepared to put that on the table. I mean, I think that if this company were ultimately to be moved, I mean, I don't know what we would ever put on that property now, but I'm prepared to offer. I'm gonna need some help with wording though.
Adjust the amendment?
The top part.
Please stand by.
May I speak to the amendment?
I want
Yep.
to make an amendment to your motion.
I'll speak to the amendment.
Mayor Collier?
From my understanding from Mr. Hawkshaw, it would require, instead of saying to permit outdoor storage of crushed vehicles to a maximum height of, it would be to remove the height restriction of the crushed vehicles in the minutes of settlement. And the second bullet, instead of to permit a temporary outdoor storage of crushed bale up to a certain height, to remove the height limit of the crushed, baled, and sheared salvage material. And the third bullet, to permit a maximum height of 12 feet fence, to remove the height restriction from the minutes of settlement of the fence. And that would allow them to make the applications.
And then it goes through the public
And then it goes
process.
to the public process. Is that what you're
Through the
trying?
chair, that is correct. So what it would be doing is putting him in the same position as any other property within that area who's subject to the zoning bylaw and the height of the fence, and they want to come in and amend that and say, we want a height fence. It puts him in the same position as any other property owner in that area. Because all the other property owners are also subject to fence height and height of stacks or storage.
Can you repeat?
So it's still amending the minutes of settlement, but it's just taking those out rather than setting them.
We have a question from Councilor Bauer.
Thank you. So if this business has not complied because he didn't want to, because he needs to have higher piles, and we decide to make a motion so that he can go through the process that everybody else will go to be fair, are we sending a message that if you don't like the situation, just give it a few years and council will let you get what you want?
It's not what I'm trying to say.
Sorry, I'm sure that's poorly worded, but I just, I don't know. I think that, is this a case where we're letting him have what he wants when he hasn't been?
Was Mr. Hannon speaking to that?
Are we setting a precedent here that if somebody is unsatisfied with how the town, the compatibility or a minimum settlement or a bylaw or a rule, that if they're honest and straightforward and say, I don't like it, I'm not doing it, and the town comes back and says, okay, then this is our recourse, that if they just allow it to carry on for 4 or 5 years, which is a headache, I completely understand that we'll eventually get to the table where we're frustrated and we'll just say, okay.
Mr. Hannon, can you comment on that? Do you concur with that?
I can't, I would be trying to get into the head of the
Yes, I'm
individual.
sure.
I will tell you that it's been frustrating, I'm sure, for the town. I'm sure it's been frustrating for the applicant as well. However, the town's position is that the material on the site is clearly listed at its maximum height. Currently, when we brought the report forward, it was double the height of the permitted fence now. So even if it went up to 11 feet, it would still be 8 feet over what we're looking at. And I have never heard through the last 5 years of direct or indirect consultation with the individual about how he's going to rectify that. If he can't maintain it at 14 feet and it's twice the size of that, how is raising the fence height going to help anything? And he's also running out of room within the footprint of the property. So even to say to make smaller piles elsewhere, he's running out of room on the site to make those piles.
So just to be clear, we're putting forth the recommendations to staff to consider to get on the other side of this with the proponent, with the owner.
Sorry to interject, if I could just partially answer your question. It is not setting a precedent. We have many situations over the time period that I've been here, which is almost too long, where people have not followed the rules. The town, from time to time, has bent over backward to try to cooperate with any individual to see if there is a way to satisfy the issue. Okay, so someone comes in and they've done something wrong in the zoning, we say, you know what, apply for a minor variance, you get your minor variance, we won't proceed with charges. We try to cooperate. If they don't get their minor variance, then charges are laid and they're forced to comply. So none of this is really setting a precedent. on how we will deal, or the town will deal with other people or other issues. So,
Okay, Mayor Collier.
Oh,
Sorry.
Um,
All right. Any other questions?
Just to wrap it up, I mean, what my intent is to try and level the playing field and put this company in the same position as any other company. And I like what Mr. Hawkshaw has said, because that's what I think that does. By removing the limitations of the minutes of settlement, it does allow them to come back and follow the same requirements as any other business, being the official plan review and the rezoning file application. I think that's correct. Is that correct? Okay. Leveling the playing field, making them the same as every other business and following the same procedures and protocols of any other business. It would come back to council through a staff report. It might be the same staff report, I don't know. But through a staff report, and then we would make the decision then based on those merits. Right now, that avenue isn't available to this business because of these minutes of settlement, like I said, being a unique situation. Okay, we're getting on, so that's good. So that's what this does, I think. And, you know, when it comes back, if he doesn't comply, then it's tough. Make that decision then. But I think that's the intent, so we'll leave it at that.
Comment or question from Madam Clerk.
Thank you. If it's okay, I just want to make sure that we have the necessary clarity on, or instructions from council to deal with the existing POA charges. So are we to abandon those? Are we to request another adjournment? Are we to pursue them? I think we maybe require some instructions from council as to, like, in light of this decision, should it pass, what we should be doing with those.
This is kind of like the driveway widening thing, right? And the fence one has been adjourned how many times? A dozen times over the years?
Through the chair, over 4 years probably.
So this has been kicked down the field many, many times already. I mean, I don't know how you would normally
And through the
do
chair,
it.
it's been adjourned at the request of the defendant,
Right.
not by the town.
Okay.
We've always been prepared to go to trial at any time, and we haven't objected to his request based on the fact that we were trying to see if a suitable solution could be looked at.
Why don't I, if council's willing, suggest that, you know, we'll send this to the, if this motion passes, send this to the business owner. He has, give him, say, I don't know, how long does it take to prepare the paperwork for this? Mr. Romanowski, is it a 6-month process? Is it a 3-month process? For him to come back with the applications to amend the official plan of zoning.
Well, first, the minutes of settlement have to be dealt with before
Right.
anything can come back. And if that's the case, then it'll be up to him and his consultants to make application to the town. But if he's gonna apply for OPA and ZBA, he has to go through pre-con, so he'll have to go through a pre-consultation process and then apply after that. It could be longer than 6 months before he actually applies for these, I guess, amendments.
I see what the clerk is asking. It would make sense to stay the court on the fence or on the file issue, but you don't want to give the guy 5 years to take his time trying to get the application through. So
Yeah, I
I
think
thought
we
you're
just
trying
need
to nail down the
instructions
timeframes.
for what we should be doing later this week. Should we be agreeable to an adjournment? Should we be requesting one, or should we be entirely abandoning charges?
Does he owe money?
Well, he hasn't been through the courts yet on it.
But I mean, bylaw fee, like the infractions that bylaw has given to him, does that equal money?
Through the chair, no. It would only be upon conviction that fines would be paid.
And through the chair, how much are those fines?
It would be up to the court's determination. We've gone through a Part 3 application, so it's an information, so we would recommend a fine. It's a second conviction. He also has a prohibition order on the property to cease and desist the repetition of an offense, so we'd be asking in the neighborhood of at least $5,000 for the conviction. Now, the courts would ultimately decide what the appropriate penalty would be.
No number.
I just thought it'd be more.
Yeah.
So after all this, like, I'm not saying that's.
Surprisingly, it's not.
So there's no process to say you violated, you know, these are the penalties associated to your actions and behavior, that you have knowingly made these decisions. But we're willing to give you wipe the slate clean and let you start again like everybody else. But you gotta pay the fees that you owe, because you did break those infractions knowingly and intentionally, based on minutes that you agreed to. So,
Regional Councilor Dice.
Just a question, how much is the cost of rezoning and
An official plan amendment is $18,775, and the zoning bylaw amendment is $11,250.
$30,000.
So what would you do as Christina? Say 5,000 for Christina? It's cheaper just to pay.
I wouldn't have done anything wrong.
So. What do you say?
You wouldn't have done anything wrong. What would be staff's recommendations for time frame for this? A year then, if 6 months is not enough time?
Typically, an OPA and a zoning bylaw amendment is a year to process.
So would it be, Madam Clerk, suitable to say we just stay it for a year? And
Through the chair, a year is probably too long. At this point, I would say that I would recommend, it's been 4 years in the courts. It's probably time now to make a decision, so it would either be that we would withdraw the charge and look again in a year if we're gonna refile, but I wouldn't put it over for another year now. We also lose some credibility, even though we aren't the ones asking for the adjournment, that the courts will look at the disposition, which is probably 19 pages now, and eventually it's gonna look like it just keeps getting moved and moved and moved, and now we're gonna agree to a year. It would probably be best, if we're not going to pursue it this time, to step back and look at it again in whatever timeframe council deems to be appropriate.
well, last time I looked at this was June 12, 17. And that was when council's recommendation was that staff look into alternative solutions. And nothing, we haven't been able to reach anything in the last year and a half. So, I don't know. I think it's better to just
Well, again, I think it all
withdraw it
depends
and
on what
then,
council's decisions are here today. I think if it rolls forward that we're gonna look at reopening some issues, then I would suggest the POA stuff to be with them.
okay, well, I would suggest that too. And then that also gives, I guess, opportunity for the owner to prove themselves over the next year.
So we have to have a vote on the amendment that Regional Councilor Crawford brought forth.
Can you read that amendment?
Can we have the whole thing read one more time?
Yes.
Marilyn, you okay with it? We're gonna,
Did you read it?
So I will read Marilyn's amendment to the motion.
okay.
That provision 1 of the motion be amended to read as follows: that staff be directed to amend the minutes of settlement between Ajax Auto Wreckers and the town of Ajax as follows: to remove height restrictions regarding outdoor storage of crushed vehicles, to remove height restrictions regarding crushed, baled, and/or sheared salvage materials, and to remove height restrictions regarding fence height on the perimeter of the subject property. This would form part of the entire motion, which would then also contain that staff be directed to accept and process official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications, and that council waives the fee for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications.
Do we have questions on this amendment to the motion now? Or
You
we
could
vote
if there
on
were
it?
any.
Or we should vote on
But
this.
this satisfies our lawyer, correct? By not putting any specific number on the height, is that right?
Yes.
And it also puts the responsibility back on the owner to come before us, is that correct? If he
Through the chair, it'll put the onus on the owner to make the necessary applications so that he now will comply with the official plan, the zoning bylaw. He's also going to have to ask for an amendment to the town's salvage bylaw, because the salvage bylaw also has provisions related to fence height. And I'm not sure if he's going to have to apply to amend the fence bylaw itself. That I'm not sure. But he's got several things that he's going to need amended so he can do what he's now doing.
And I'm sorry, waiving a fee, the fee is the 30 grand we're talking about? Waiving that?
Or
Not waiving it,
staying.
but that's how much it is.
Sorry, that's in the motion,
18,000
right?
plus 11,000.
To not make him pay that. Is that what that meant, Mayor?
I think so. Yep.
And sorry, I'm.
Yes, Regional Councilor Lee.
What happens if he doesn't do any of that, what we just prescribed? So,
Then the charges are late again.
Yeah, it's back to zero.
and then hypothetically, we have this conversation again in a year and a half's time, where we're just like, well, what do we do about it now?
Trust me, I will have no mercy.
But
If that's the case.
shouldn't, like, I'm just struggling to wonder why we don't have mercy now. If it's been 4 years, like, why wouldn't it be no mercy now? Like, sorry.
Why is that? Well, because we've never tried to amend it and allow any relief. There's never been any, this has been a line for a long time.
I was going to say that the amendments that Mayor Collier putting in are new.
Yeah.
The motion is new. The
The
direction
minutes
is
have
new.
not been amended in 18 years. This has been that's that.
This is a tough
Ultimately,
one.
it comes back and everybody can still do your. I never thought this would take this long.
Okay, so where are we at with this? So we need to vote on Maryland,
On the amendment.
Regional Councilors Crawford's amendment.
Well, I would like to comment.
Sir, Mr. Huckshot.
We had a question earlier about setting a precedent, and I said it wasn't setting a precedent to deal with the matter the way we are. I am concerned about waiving the fee. If you want to put him in the same position as anyone else in this employment area who wants to amend something, they have to pay fees. So I'm concerned if you're waiving the fee for him, and the person next door comes in and says, I want to hire a fence, and by the way, waive my fee. So I am concerned about setting a precedent for waiving the fee portion of this motion.
That would be another, sure.
Yep.
I think that would be another amendment, and I would tend to agree with you based on that. But I think we have to vote on this amendment first, and then if somebody wants to move another amendment to remove on number 3, can't be me, but somebody.
Councilor Bowers.
At that time, then we would vote on that amendment as well, and then on the motion as amended, which would not include number 3.
Madam Clerk, you say
If I
withdraw.
could, I think that this amendment process is unnecessary. I think you're agreeable to what Marilyn
Yep.
has proposed, so it's a friendly amendment. If you're agreeable to striking number 3, you can amend your motion in any way you want before it's
Done.
voted upon.
So 3 is stricken.
Just so we're
That's
clear.
a friendly from this list.
Okay, you gotta say the whole thing again. Now we're all confused.
We're just
I
taking
think we're
off number
saying-
3, which is the fee.
Still gotta hear it again, sorry, just,
Well, this
yeah.
isn't very
So I think
So there's no higher.
It simplifies matters a fair bit.
Okay.
All right, so this is the full status of the motion as moved by Sean right now. That staff be directed to amend the minutes of settlement between Ajax Auto Wreckers and the town of Ajax as follows. To remove height restrictions regarding outdoor storage of crushed vehicles, to remove height restrictions regarding crushed, baled, and/or sheared salvage materials, and to remove height restrictions regarding fence height on the perimeter of the subject property. 2, that staff be directed to accept and process official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications.
And the fee stays the same.
Yeah,
He
they
still
pay
goes
they
the
pay
money.
the fees.
He still goes the.
And there's no time frame on this.
1 year of this.
Should that be in
Should the timeframe be in the motion?
the, what's up to Sean, right?
I'm looking at the clerk.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, should we put the timeframe in?
The timeframe for submitting the applications?
Yeah,
Um,
because that's important, because if they don't, it looks like he's not doing anything. Like he
Okay,
hasn't.
well, but what's the remedy if the minutes of settlement are already amended and then he takes 2 years to submit the applications? So I don't know that we have any control over that. Is that correct?
You can't force somebody to submit.
Right.
Through the chair, I suppose as negotiating the amendment to the minutes of settlement, we could add a clause that requires him to make the applications for official plan, rezoning, whatever else he needs to do within a certain period of time. We could say within 3 months of signing these revised minutes. And if you don't, then the changes we've proposed, the height and so forth, are void. And you're back to where you started.
Can we leave
Yeah,
that up to
I
you?
like that.
Or do we have to have it in the motion?
You could.
Yeah. Okay, so that's direction to staff.
I like that.
So that'll come from the,
So 3 months in a sense.
yeah. but
3
you'll-
months from when they sign the minutes of settlement, so it might take, call it 4 or 5 months to get the minutes of settlement amended, and then they have to have, so they can be preparing those concurrently with the minutes of settlement.
We would have to come back anyways with the amendment to the minutes of settlement for council approval.
To give us to
To give
approve,
you the
and you'll
final
put that in
approval.
there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Okay,
even with this passes today, It's still gonna come back to council for review and approval of the minutes of settlement after the fact.
Okay, that's,
And can't go on the deck.
does that speak, so it's gonna come back to us before this.
So we're approving,
Staff is
letting
gonna-
them put it all together for us.
And it's gonna come back.
And we can review it. Okay, so then now, if everyone's done with their questions and comments?
You can call the vote on the motion.
Okay, so we're going to call a vote on the motion that Mayor Collier has put forth. All in favor? All opposed? You're opposed? Okay, so the vote carries 4 in favor, 3 opposed. All right. Could I get a motion to enter in a closed discussion of personnel and
Motion to close
individuals?
discussion.
Can I get a motion on that? Okay, all in favor? Okay, can we take a, sorry, let's take a 1 minute break. Oh, sorry, 2 minutes? 1:59, 1:58.